The night was still, a soft breeze rustling the trees outside as Taylor leaned back on the couch, flipping through TV channels while Janna finished tidying up in the kitchen. Their 2-year-old son, Ryan, had been asleep for over an hour, his small form curled up peacefully in his crib. It was a night like any other, until Buddy, their loyal Labrador, suddenly lifted his head from the rug where he had been resting. At first, Taylor barely noticed. Buddy was an attentive dog, always perking up at distant noises or the occasional car passing by outside. But this time, something felt different. Instead of relaxing again, Buddy rose to his feet, his ears stiff, his gaze locked toward the hallway leading to Ryan's room. His body tensed, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then, he let out a low, guttural growl. Taylor frowned. "What's up, Buddy?" he called out, expecting the dog to calm down. But Buddy didn't. His growl deepened, his stance firm. He took a slow step forward, his focus never breaking from the hallway. Janna walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Is he growling?" she asked, a slight edge to her voice. Taylor nodded. "Yeah, he's acting weird." Buddy took another step, then another, before stopping just outside Ryan's bedroom door. The growl never stopped. It was quiet but constant, like a warning, a sound Taylor had only heard when Buddy encountered something truly threatening. Feeling uneasy, Taylor got up, walking toward the hallway. "Come on, Buddy," he said, his voice laced with forced calmness. "There's nothing there." He reached out to pet the dog's head, but Buddy didn't even acknowledge him. His gaze was fixed on something inside the room. Taylor's stomach clenched. Janna followed, her motherly instincts kicking in as she brushed past Taylor and reached for the doorknob. As soon as she twisted it open, Buddy lunged forward, pushing himself into the room before either of them could react. His growl turned sharp, his fur bristling as he lowered his stance, ready to pounce. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the nightlight in the corner. Everything was exactly as they had left it, Ryan sleeping peacefully in his crib, the rocking chair motionless beside it, the bookshelf stacked with bedtime stories. But Buddy wasn't looking at any of that. He was staring at the far left corner of the room. Taylor and Janna turned their heads slowly, their breath caught in their throats. It was just a wall. An old wooden dresser stood against it, the stuffed animals neatly arranged on top. Nothing looked out of place. But Buddy's growls intensified, his eyes locked on something they couldn't see. Janna felt a shiver run down her spine. "Taylor," she whispered, gripping his arm. Taylor swallowed, forcing a chuckle. "It's fine. It's just," he hesitated. Buddy's growling wouldn't stop. Janna, unable to shake the unease creeping over her, moved quickly to Ryan's crib, lifting their son into her arms. Ryan stirred slightly but didn't wake, his tiny hand gripping onto her shirt. Taylor knelt beside Buddy, rubbing his fur. "Come on, boy, what is it?" Buddy didn't move, didn't blink, didn't relax. His entire body remained poised, muscles tense, as if waiting for something to happen. The eerie tension from the night before still clung to the air as Taylor stepped into the hallway the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting warm golden hues over the house. Yet the weight in his chest remained. He had barely slept, replaying Buddy's strange behavior in his mind. Janna, too, had been restless. She sat at the kitchen table, stirring a cup of coffee absent-mindedly while Ryan babbled cheerfully in his high chair. It was as if their son was oblivious to the creeping dread that had settled over the house. Buddy, on the other hand, was anything but indifferent. He sat by the entrance of the hallway, his eyes flicking toward Ryan's bedroom every few minutes, as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge. The playful, tail-wagging dog they had known for years was now a creature on high alert. His ears perked, his muscles coiled. "Are we just going to ignore this?" Janna asked suddenly, her voice tight with anxiety. Taylor exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to think." There was nothing there. Janna, then why is he still acting like this? They both turned their eyes to Buddy, who continued to watch the hallway with unnerving focus. That night, Taylor and Janna decided to keep an eye on Buddy's behavior. If it was just a fluke, then surely tonight would be different. It wasn't. The moment the house grew quiet and the lights dimmed, Buddy began his routine. Just like before, he abandoned his usual sleeping spot in the living room and stationed himself at Ryan's bedroom door. The growling returned, low, guttural, and unrelenting. Taylor's stomach tightened as he sat up in bed. Listening, the sound sent a ripple of unease through his body. He reached over, gripping Janna's hand, feeling the slight tremble in her fingers. "I need to check," he muttered. Janna nodded but didn't let go of his hand. "Be careful." Taylor took a deep breath and slipped out of bed, padding softly toward the hallway. Buddy's growl grew louder as he approached. Taylor felt the hairs on his arms rise as he reached for the doorknob. Turning it slowly, the hinges creaked as the door swung open, revealing the dimly lit room. Ryan slept soundly in his crib, undisturbed, but Buddy wasn't looking at him. He was staring at the same corner as before. Taylor's pulse pounded as he stepped into the room. The air felt heavier here, thicker. His breathing seemed unnaturally loud. He forced his feet forward and placed a hand on the dresser, shaking it slightly. It was solid, nothing unusual. He turned back to Buddy, about to scold him for overreacting, when suddenly, Ryan jerked awake with a scream. Janna rushed into the room, her eyes wild with panic as she scooped their son into her arms. Ryan clung to her, sobbing, his tiny hands gripping her shirt as if terrified. Taylor's breath caught. Ryan never woke up crying. And that's when he noticed it. The rocking chair in the corner was moving, slowly, back and forth, as if someone, or something, had just been sitting there. Taylor's throat tightened as he stared at the rocking chair. The dim glow from the nightlight cast long, eerie shadows that made the chair's movement seem even more unnatural. His rational mind screamed for an explanation, maybe an open window? A draft? But deep inside, he knew neither of those things could explain the way the chair was rocking, slow, deliberate, as if someone had just risen from it. Janna clutched Ryan tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. "Taylor, what's happening?" Buddy let out a sharp bark, his body rigid as he stepped protectively in front of Janna and Ryan. His growling was more intense now, his teeth bared as he focused on the chair. Taylor's hands balled into fists as he forced himself to take a step forward. The floor creaked beneath his weight. The chair stopped. The silence was deafening. For a moment, all Taylor could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, a single chilling sound cut through the quiet, a faint, creaking noise, coming from inside the wall. Janna gasped. "Tell me you heard that." Taylor nodded, unable to form words. He turned back to the rocking chair, slowly reaching out to touch it. The instant his fingers brushed the wood, a deep, cold sensation flooded his body, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. Buddy barked louder, his claws scraping against the wooden floor as he lunged toward the chair. Snarling viciously, his hackles were raised, his body tense, as if he was ready to attack something Taylor and Janna couldn't see. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the rocking stopped. The chair stood still, lifeless once more. Janna exhaled sharply, holding Ryan so close that his whimpers were muffled against her chest. "Taylor, we're getting out of this room. Now." Taylor didn't argue. Every instinct in his body told him she was right. He backed away, eyes never leaving the chair, until they were all in the hallway. The moment Janna crossed the threshold with Ryan in her arms, Buddy followed, then quickly turned and shoved his weight against the door, slamming it shut with a loud bang. Taylor locked it without thinking. They stood there for a long moment, catching their breath, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them like an unbearable force. Janna looked at him, her face pale. "Something's in there, Taylor." He wanted to deny it, wanted to say that Buddy was just overreacting, that it was all in their heads. But he had seen it. He had felt it. And Ryan had woken up screaming. Taylor swallowed hard. "We need to find out what's inside that wall." Janna shuddered. "And what if we don't like the answer?" Buddy, still growling, sat beside them, his eyes locked on the closed door. He already knew. And whatever it was, he wasn't letting it near Ryan again. Taylor stood in the hallway, staring at the closed nursery door. His hands were clammy, his breath uneven. Every logical part of his brain told him to leave it alone, to pack up Janna and Ryan and leave the house that very night. But something deep inside gnawed at him, an unsettling whisper that refused to be ignored. Something was inside that wall, and it was watching them. Janna clutched Ryan protectively, still shaken from the night's events. "Taylor, what if it's dangerous?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Buddy sat beside them, ears perked, tail stiff. His body remained tense, ready to lunge at any sign of danger. He hadn't stopped growling since they left the nursery. He knew something they didn't. Taylor ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. I have to find out. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, he walked back into the nursery, Buddy following close behind. The rocking chair remained still, but the room felt wrong. The air was thick, suffocating, as if something unseen had been disturbed. Taylor crouched down near the wall where the noises had come from, pressing his ear against the surface. For a few moments, there was nothing, just silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. The sound came from inside the wall. Taylor's breath hitched. His skin prickled with cold dread. Without hesitation, he grabbed the crowbar and drove it into the dry wall. A chunk of plaster cracked and fell away, revealing the rotting wooden beams beneath. The stench of damp wood and decay filled the room, making Taylor gag. Buddy barked wildly, his growls echoing against the nursery walls. Janna stood at the door, gripping Ryan with one arm while covering her mouth with the other. Taylor, be careful. Taylor ignored the fear curling inside him and pried open more of the wall. He expected to find mold, old pipes, maybe even a rodent's nest. What he didn't expect was the small, blackened object wrapped in brittle cloth, wedged deep between the beams. His hands trembled as he reached in and pulled it out. The fabric crumbled between his fingers, revealing something far worse, a small, withered doll. Its porcelain face was cracked. Its once painted eyes faded to an eerie emptiness. The arms and legs were stiff. Its tiny fingers curled as if frozen in time. A sharp chill crawled down Taylor's spine. Buddy barked louder, baring his teeth at the doll. Janna gasped, "What is that?" Taylor turned the doll over in his hands, and his heart nearly stopped. Carved into the back of its head was a name he had never spoken before. But Ryan had. The name the baby whispered in his sleep. The one that had made Buddy restless. The reason their son had woken up screaming. It was right there, etched in the fragile porcelain. Lillian. Janna's breath caught in her throat as she read the name. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs, her arms tightening around Ryan as though sheer force could shield him from the growing horror. Taylor held the doll at arm's length, his hands shaking. The name Lillian was carved deep into the porcelain, worn and aged, as if someone had desperately etched it in long ago. He turned to Janna, his voice hushed and uneven. Ryan's been saying this name, over and over again. Buddy's growls deepened. The Labrador stood rigid, his stance tense and defensive. His fur bristled along his back as he bared his teeth at the doll. A primal warning that sent chills up Taylor's spine. Janna swallowed hard. What does this mean? Taylor's mind raced, piecing together the strange occurrences, the knocking inside the wall, Ryan's sleep-talking, Buddy's aggressive behavior. It all led back to this doll, this name. Then Ryan did something that made Janna's blood run cold. The baby, previously quiet in her arms, suddenly reached out. His tiny fingers stretched toward the doll, his expression blank yet eerily focused. His lips parted, and he murmured in his small, sleepy voice, "Lillian?" Janna gasped and stumbled backward, nearly losing her grip on Ryan. No, this isn't possible," she whispered. Buddy snapped his jaws, lunging toward Taylor as if demanding he drop the doll. Taylor flinched and let it slip from his grasp. The porcelain figure hit the wooden floor with a dull clack, but the moment it did, the nursery was consumed by an unnatural chill. The overhead light flickered violently. A sudden gust of air swept through the room, rattling the crib, sending loose papers flying off the nearby dresser. The rocking chair, motionless only moments ago, began to creak. Slowly, methodically, it swayed back and forth, as though an unseen force had taken a seat. Buddy's barking turned frantic, his deep growls vibrating through the walls. He planted himself in front of Janna and Ryan, a living shield between them and something they could not see. Taylor stumbled back, his pulse pounding. What the hell is happening? A distant whisper curled through the room. A child's whisper. "You found me," Janna screamed. Taylor scrambled to pick up the doll, but the moment his fingers grazed the porcelain, the nursery door slammed shut. Janna pounded against the door. "Taylor, open it." The light above them shattered, glass raining onto the floor. The entire room trembled, as if the very house was exhaling, all along. slow breath that carried something unseen, something ancient. And then, silence. Buddy stood firm, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His golden eyes stayed locked on the rocking chair, which now stood perfectly still. Taylor turned to Janna, his face pale, his voice barely a whisper. "We were never alone in this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Janna clutched Ryan tightly against her chest, her heart hammering as she stared at the now motionless rocking chair. Taylor stood frozen, his breath shallow, his fingers hovering over the doll as if it had burned him. Buddy remained tense, his golden fur bristling, his eyes locked on something unseen. Then, a single creak. The chair rocked forward once. Janna sucked in a sharp breath. "We need to get out of here," she whispered. Taylor didn't argue. He grabbed Janna's hand, guiding her toward the door, but before they could reach it, Ryan giggled. A high, innocent, baby's giggle. Janna's blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned her gaze to her son. Ryan, still cradled in her arms, was staring past her, past Taylor, past Buddy, his small hand lifted as if waving to someone standing right behind them. Buddy erupted into barks, snapping his teeth at empty air. He lunged, his deep growls reverberating off the walls, but his claws scratched at nothing. Janna spun around. Nothing was there, but Ryan's eyes glowed with eerie fascination, his tiny lips parting in an all-too-familiar whisper. "Lillian." Taylor's breath caught. He grabbed the doll off the floor, gripping it tightly as he glanced wildly around the room. "This thing, this name, we need to know what's happening," he muttered, his voice edged with desperation. Janna's hands trembled. "Taylor, I don't care about answers. I care about getting Ryan out of this house." Before he could respond, a cold gust of air blew past them. It carried something unseen but felt, a presence. A chill that burrowed into their bones. The wooden crib rattled slightly. The closet door creaked open, inch by inch, as if something was stepping out. Buddy's barking turned into a whimper. He backed up, pressing himself protectively against Janna's legs. The dog never whimpered. Taylor moved quickly. He snatched his phone from his pocket, hands shaking as he pulled up a search bar. Lillian plus house history. The first few results were meaningless. But then, his eyes locked onto an old newspaper article. His stomach twisted as he read the faded headline. "Local girl missing. Presumed dead after tragic incident in family home." Janna's breath hitched. "What?" Taylor scrolled rapidly, his voice shaking as he read aloud. "Lillian Carter, age 6, vanished inside her home. Parents found, traumatized, claimed she was taken, but no evidence of a break-in." Janna's grip on Ryan tightened. Where did she live?" Taylor's face paled. He slowly looked up at Janna. "This house." The room grew colder. A sharp knock came from the closet. 3 knocks. Deliberate, rhythmic. Buddy growled. Janna felt her pulse race. Ryan smiled. And then, with terrifying certainty, Taylor whispered, "She never left." A crushing silence filled the room, thick with unseen energy. The rhythmic 3 knocks from the closet sent icy tendrils of fear crawling up Janna's spine. She tightened her grip on Ryan, his tiny body warm against her own. But the child showed no fear. Instead, he smiled. Buddy's growl deepened. Taylor's fingers clenched around the old newspaper article on his phone. "We have to go," he whispered, stepping back toward the door. "Now." But the door slammed shut. The lights flickered, the old bulbs buzzing like angry insects, casting twisted shadows on the nursery walls. The rocking chair began to move again, back and forth, creaking loudly, as if something unseen had taken a seat. The air grew dense, suffocating, charged with something unnatural. Janna felt her knees tremble. "Taylor," she gasped, "I don't think we're alone." And then, the whispers started, soft at first, indistinct, like the hushed murmurs of a child just beyond hearing. They came from every direction, the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The air itself carried the chilling sound, wrapping around them like a ghostly lullaby. Buddy snapped. He lunged toward the closet, teeth bared, barking wildly. The closet door slammed open, revealing only darkness. But something about that darkness felt wrong, too deep, too empty, too hungry. Then Ryan giggled again. Janna felt her blood freeze as he lifted his tiny hand and waved toward the darkness. "Lillian," he cooed. The whispering stopped. The silence was worse. It was waiting, watching, listening. Taylor acted first. He lunged for the doll. Lillian's doll, the one that had been in Ryan's crib. The one Buddy had been growling at for days. He grabbed it and ran. The second his hands closed around it, the nursery erupted into chaos. The lights burst, glass shards flying, plunging them into shadows and panic. The rocking chair flew backward, crashing into the wall. The crib rattled violently as if something unseen was shaking it in fury. Janna screamed. Taylor. He didn't stop. He bolted for the fireplace in the living room, Buddy barking at his heels. "Come on," he shouted. Janna ran. Ryan clutched against her chest. She could hear footsteps behind them, but no one was there. Taylor threw open the fireplace gate, shoving in the doll. "If this belongs to her, we're giving it back," he growled, grabbing the lighter from the mantel. Janna barely had time to process before Taylor lit the flame. The second the fire touched the doll's fabric, a deafening shriek filled the house. It was the sound of a child's wail, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. The house shook. The walls groaned. Buddy howled. And then, silence. The house stopped trembling. The air grew still. The suffocating presence was gone. Buddy sniffed the air, his tail finally wagging. Janna held Ryan close, her heart hammering. Taylor turned to her, his face pale, hands shaking. "It's over," he whispered. But Janna wasn't sure, because from the nursery upstairs, the rocking chair creaked one last time. The night had never felt so long. The air inside the house was still thick with the echo of something unseen. But the unbearable weight of suffocating dread was gone. Janna, Taylor, and Buddy sat in the living room, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, their minds reeling from what had just happened. Ryan, on the other hand, had fallen peacefully asleep in Janna's arms, as if none of it had happened, as if the horrors of the past few days had never touched him at all. Taylor rubbed his temples, still trying to process everything. The newspaper article on his phone showed an old black and white picture of a little girl with sad eyes holding an eerily familiar doll. Lillian Mayfield, the girl who had died in this house decades ago. A child who had been lost to tragedy and forgotten by time, except, it seemed, by Ryan. Janna's voice trembled as she broke the silence. "Taylor, what if we didn't just burn the doll? What if we set her free?" Taylor exhaled slowly. He didn't want to believe in ghosts. But after everything they had just endured, how could he deny it? Buddy suddenly perked up, his ears twitching toward the nursery. But this time, he didn't growl. He didn't bark. Instead, he simply watched. Janna and Taylor followed his gaze toward the staircase, where the faintest sound reached their ears, the sound of tiny, distant footsteps. But there was no fear, no threat, just the faint impression of a presence fading away. Janna squeezed Taylor's hand. "Maybe she was never trying to hurt us," she murmured. "Maybe she was just stuck. And Ryan was the only one who could see her." Taylor swallowed hard, his grip tightening around hers. "And Buddy was the only one who could protect us." He looked at their dog, the true hero of the night, who was now lying down at their feet, watching over Ryan as he slept. For the first time in days, there was peace. The following morning, Taylor wasted no time calling a repair crew to fix the fireplace and replace the broken lights. He also made another decision, one that Janna didn't argue with. They were moving, even though the house now felt normal. Something about staying felt wrong. There were too many questions that had no answers. Too many memories that would linger in the walls like whispers waiting to be heard again. They packed up within a week. It was almost as if the house itself was eager to let them go. On their last night, Janna stood in the nursery one final time. The new owners set to arrive within days. She ran her fingers over the now empty crib, listening to the quiet. No knocks, no whispers, just silence. As she turned to leave, Buddy stood at the doorway, waiting for her. His tail wagged once before he gave the room one last look. And for just a fleeting moment, Janna thought she saw something, a shadow too small to be an adult. Standing by the window, she blinked, and it was gone. With one final breath, she whispered, "Goodbye, Lillian." The house remained silent, and as the family drove away, Buddy rested his head in Ryan's lap, his watch never ending. The story of Taylor, Janna, Ryan, and their loyal dog Buddy serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes, the ones who love us most see what we cannot. From the very beginning, Buddy sensed something was wrong. Long before Taylor and Janna ever considered the possibility, he stood guard, unwavering in his duty to protect his family. Even when they didn't understand his warnings, his actions reinforced the idea that animals possess extraordinary instincts, ones that go beyond human comprehension. This experience also highlights the importance of listening to signs, even when they don't make sense. Taylor and Janna ignored Buddy's behavior at first, dismissing it as paranoia, but as the days passed, their denial nearly led them to disaster. It was only when they finally paid attention, truly acknowledged Buddy's warnings, that they were able to save themselves and, perhaps, an unseen presence that had been trapped in their home for decades. Fear often blinds us to the truth, making us skeptical of the unknown. But this story teaches us that just because we cannot see something, doesn't mean it isn't there. The past lingers in unexpected ways, and the things we choose to ignore can come back to haunt us, sometimes literally. Most importantly, this tale is about trust and loyalty. Buddy didn't just bark at shadows, he stood between his family and danger. Refusing to abandon them, his devotion ultimately saved them. In the end, the lesson is simple. Listen to the ones who love you, even when you don't understand why. Sometimes, the greatest protectors are the ones who never leave your side, even in the darkness.